Yo guys, welcome to the Zelda fiction. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got neglected and became the highest supreme emperor? Part 1. Huge shout out to DaoistDreamwalker for this story. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Pain, that was all he felt. Trudging across the water as the still body of Sasuke lay inches before him, Naruto finally dropped as well. Exhaustion overwhelmed him and his panting was the only sound he could make. The fiery chakra of the 9 tails had long since retracted. He didn't even have the strength to do anything besides squatting here. Still though, he succeeded. Idiot, he mumbled towards Sasuke. The battle had taken everything he had and then some. Calling forth a power he never wanted. Naruto, said Ninja, perked up somewhat at the voice. He recognized and mumbled a soft, Kakashi-sensei. The silver-haired ninja raced forwards, in an instant he reached Naruto's location. The boy ninja couldn't keep himself awake anymore, he sighed in relief one last time at his sensei's presence, all will be well. Kakashi leapt from tree to tree carrying Naruto bridal style in his arms. His wayward pupil, Sasuke, was strapped to his back. The Uchiha's injuries comparatively had been lighter than Naruto's, though both suffered from chakra exhaustion. He couldn't help but grimace at the events that transpired. Why? Why had Sasuke so willingly betrayed the leaf? What had he done wrong? I'm sorry, Minato-sensei, he couldn't help but mumble. Naruto's condition plus Sasuke's actions, more proof he shouldn't be a sensei. Though successful, the Sasuke retrieval mission had saw the new generation of genin exhausted to the brink. So much had happened so fast that it was almost as if another shinobi world war had been taking place. Kakashi wouldn't wish that hell on anyone, especially not on these brave genins. But they too had gotten something out of it. Valuable life experience. Soon, Konoha's gates were upon him. Kakashi slowed to walking speed as he approached. A retinue of personnel were already there. Kotetsu and Izumo along with a whole slew of other returning Chunin and Jonin. It would seem Kakashi was the last to arrive. His third student, Sakura Haruno, was also there waiting anxiously for him. Kakashi couldn't help but grimace when the young girl's face twisted into a look of horror. They need medical attention, he called out without hesitation. Bring them here. Tsunade wasted no effort pushing her way to the front. The next several hours became a blur as the genin were rushed to the hospital. Tsunade herself worked on stabilizing and restoring them to health. She put aside her duties as Hokage to personally be there for them. Naruto's condition was horrendous. Sasuke hadn't pulled any punches during their fight. His body was littered with bloody wounds and chances of flesh were torn out. The Jinchuriki had to go through surgeries just to get by. Soon, the hours turned into days. Before anyone knew it, a week had passed. Ngh. Sasuke jolted awake. His sweat marred the white sheets of the hospital bed. His vision was blurry and his mind lagged behind. Even so, he tilted his head to get a better idea of his surroundings. Just barely, he could make out the shape of another person, one going towards the door. Yelling perhaps? No, definitely calling for help. Sasuke's mind managed to regain some clarity. His body was sore all over. But at least now he got a better idea of his surroundings. This was not Oto, he wasn't in custody of Orochimaru. No, this was Konoha. I lost, he mumbled. Awake, I see. Sasuke's attention shifted to the woman who spoke. It was the Lady Hokage, Tsunade Senju. Lady Hokage, he mumbled. Ma'am, give him to me. I'll make him squeal all he knows, a bold man with heavy scarring said. Sasuke recognized him. This was the same man who tested them during the Chunin exams. Ibiki, if he recalled correctly. Gods, Sasuke sagged. The Chunin exams were not so long ago, yet it felt like years had passed. So much had happened. Orochimaru, the third homage, the mark, why did he decide to run in the first place? Strength, strength above all else. Power was all he needed. Now that chance was ruined. He felt both anger and regret. He'd turned on the leaf, on his friends. There was no going back for him. He's a traitor now. Once Ibiki was done with him, he'd likely be executed, last Uchiha or not, civilian council be damned. While the prestige of the Uchiha name earned him many supporters on that civilian's end, the shinobis were not so forgiving. The shinobi were also who controlled the village. You won't get much out of him in that condition, Tsunade shook her head. But rest assured, he'll get what he deserves. Yes, Lady Hokage. How's Naruto? He mumbled. That is not your concern, traitor, Tsunade spat. That was when they left him. But not before tripping the guards. No chances were taken with him anymore. Sasuke sighed, could things get any worse? Deep beneath Konoha, Danzo Shimura stood. The war hawk scoffed. Infiltrated by a traitor, caught on our back foot, sending genin of all people. Konoha truly has become weak, the old man clicked in anger. Fu, Toryun, notify the others, he commanded. We'll make our move. Konoha needs to be cleansed. You should get some rest, Tsunade, Jiraiya's irritating voice called out to her. What good will that do? The blonde scoffed. Listen, don't beat yourself up over it. The kid's fine now, he's already due make a full recovery, you made sure of that, he said. But he still hasn't woken up, the Hokage retorted. Throwing yourself into work also isn't healthy, nor is it helping, Jiraiya shook his head. Look, the village is facing the worst crisis it had in decades and we need you strong. Do you think your current image portrays that? Tsunade had to admit, Jiraiya's words rang true. She hadn't slept for days, nor had she taken a bath. She took no breaks aside from food and had worked non-stop. Black bags hung from her eyes, things kept hidden by her gain jutsu, but that couldn't hide her hunched, tired posture. And what would you have me do? The village is still crippled, many Chunin and Jonin are dead, enemies come and go as they please. I need to be here. Simple, get some sleep. You can worry about the village tomorrow. The world isn't gonna end if you don't rest, Jiraiya encouraged. And like I said, the kid'll be fine, the mission was a success, you should be celebrating. Tsunade sighed tiredly. Jiraiya gave a pleading look. Deep down, Tsunade knew he was right. Very well, she relented. Let's get this over with. She stumbled her way off of her office chair. Her feet wobbled and her muscles ached. Whoa there, you stink. Shut up, she gave the Sannin a punch at the jab. With Jiraiya helping her. They made their way out of the Hokage building. The old Senju compounds she'd been staying weren't far, having been originally built so that her grandfather could get home quickly. Her Umbu guards trailed behind them steadily. Their ever-vigilance remained, wary of any attacks. You know, I think things will start to look up from here, Jiraiya said as they walked. Orochimaru's suffered a huge loss of his forces, he couldn't get Sasuke, and we've come out of things strong. Konoha's due to rise in the coming years with this batch of genin. Jiraiya's attempt to cheer her up was much appreciated. Tsunade still wasn't over Naruto's condition, the kid looked dead by the time Kakashi got back. Gods, she wanted to punch him to kingdom come for not being faster. Perhaps she should punch him, it'll at least alleviate her stress. Lady Hokage, Tsunade's tired eyes instantly snapped to attention. Jiraiya and her Umbu as well were instantly on guard. Around them, standing on rooftops and lamp poles, Umbu ninjas stood. Tsunade squinted her eyes, she didn't recognize these men and women. Root, Jiraiya spat. Speak, what are you all doing here? Tsunade demanded. She was given no response. Instead, these shinobi took an aggressive stance. Tsunade Senju, the leading root ninja said. You have proven yourself unsuitable for the position of Hokage. Abdicate immediately or suffer the consequences. Just you. The Hokage scoffed. She cracked her knuckle. For your own good, you should surrender, Konoha's own esteemed elder Danzo Shimura said, walking forwards. "You are an asset for Konoha, I would prefer not to lose you too," he explained. "I take it you're turning traitor," Tsunade spat. As if that wasn't obvious, Jiraiya walked forwards ready for the fight. "You must be dreaming if you think you'd walk away from this, Danzo. I didn't think you were this foolish." "No, I could never win a direct confrontation between you all," Danzo admitted. "But that's why I hired them." Jiraiya narrowed his eyes. He turned around to see black cloaked figures approaching him. These men wore black cloaks with red clouds, Akatsuki members. Kakuzu of the Hidden Waterfall, Sasori of the Red Sand, Kisame and Itachi. Jiraiya swallowed a gulp. "Quite the lineup, I must say. You consort with rogue shinobi?" Tsunade spat towards Danzo. The older man gave no response, merely the sign for attack. The coup of Konoha will be remembered in history as the starting point of one of the greatest empires in the known world. Known far and wide as Emperor Gaotai, real name Mingren, or by his Nipponese name, Naruto, Emperor Gaotai's escape from Konoha will mark the beginning of his ascensions. Though much is shrouded in mystery regarding the event, what is known was that at some point after the Sasuke retrieval mission, then Konoha elder Danzo Shimura hired the group, known infamously now as the Akatsuki, to aid in his attempts to usurp the ruling power of the village. Danzo's E-side possessed incredible fighting strength, totaling many S-ranked shinobi, equal to some of the most accomplished masters of the Middle Kingdom, perhaps even superior in some ways. With the likes of Kakuzu, Sasori, and Kisame, he proved too great of a challenge for the leaders of Konoha. This, in addition to his vast forces of elite root shinobi, made the surprise takeover happen virtually overnight. However, in a shocking turn of events, then infamous criminal Itachi Uchiha turned against his own allies in the Akatsuki. The famous war hero of the Battle of Shangshi village, aided the Konoha loyalists in escape from Konoha. Though the village was lost, many loyal shinobi were able to survive and flee into the forests the Land of Fire was so famous for. However, a subsequent skirmish with root forces will force the then 13-year-old Emperor Gaotai to fall into a river and subsequently wash into the open ocean. Nevertheless, Emperor Gaotai's arrival in the central lands of Huaxia will mark the reunification of a land long torn in strife. Origins of the Golden Empire, Grand Historian 1. Naruto awoke to find himself not resting upon a clean hospital bed, but a makeshift stretcher out in the woods. A temporary camp of several hundred people all out in the woods near a river running out towards the sea. Naruto struggled. "Hey, Naruto's awake," Sakura's frantic cry awoke the blonde Jinchuriki. He started pushing himself out of bed with some grunts. Noticing his difficulties, Sakura immediately got to his side and began helping him. "Hey, take it easy," she said. "Sasuke, where's Sasuke?" he asked. Well, Sakura had a thoughtful look on her inside. "Sasuke's still under watch. A lot has happened since the mission." She cast a downcast look at Naruto. "I'm sorry," she admitted. "What? What happened, you know? The mission was successful, right?" he asked hopefully. "Yeah, it was, you brought Sasuke back fine." It's just afterwards, Sakura appeared very unsure. She struggled to know just how to break the news of the coup to Naruto. "Naruto! Naruto! Kid!" A slew of voices erupted from outside the tent he'd been resting in. The flaps opened to reveal more of his friends and fellow genin. Kiba, Shikamaru, Hinata, Choji, even Jiraiya had rushed here due to the news. The news of Naruto's awakening had spread fast. Almost supernaturally fast, in fact, as within the hour, the entire encampment knew. Very quickly, Tsunade had arrived to personally check on his condition. She was extra careful to not open any old injuries and triple-check to see if he was alright. "I'm telling you, I'm fine, Granny," Naruto grunted in embarrassment. What kid wouldn't be with being treated like a toddler in front of so many of his friends? "Naruto, you can't fault her. You should have seen yourself when Kakashi-sensei brought you back," Sakura smiled sadly. Naruto understood her meaning and nodded. Scratching the back of his head, he apologized. So, what happened? He asked. Why's everyone so tense? Heh, sometimes I forget how observant you can be. Jiraiya's sad look caught Naruto's attention. Pervy sage, what's the matter, he said. From beginning to end, something major had been up. First, he wasn't in the hospital. Second, it was strange for so many shinobi personnel to be outside. Third, many of them looked scuffled. Should we tell him? You kidding, he just woke up, give him some time. But the village. The whispers around him irritated Naruto. He couldn't help but feel excluded. Shut up and just tell me what's going on, he yelled. Naruto, Hinata whispered, the corner of her eyes began gathering tears. She wasn't the only one, the people around him all had a depressed aura around him. Tsunade sighed and held her forehead, feeling her fatigue. Naruto, thing is. Konoha is no more, a new voice called out from behind everyone. Naruto tensed, recognizing the voice. How could he not when just weeks ago, this person had mercilessly put Sasuke and Kakashi in the hospital? Itachi, Naruto leapt to his feet ready to fight. Though he was stopped by Sakura. What are you doing? That's Itachi Uchiha, he yelled. We know, we don't like this any more than you do, Shikamaru said with a glare. But right now, he's one of us. Tsunade glared at the Uchiha. You didn't have to be so blunt, she said. He just came out of a coma. And you don't have to baby him. He deserves to know the gravity of the situation. Itachi shook his head. Look, I'm sorry for attacking you back in Shikuba town, but that's in the past. You expect me to forgive you after what you've done? No, I don't. But right now, more pressing matters are at stake. The fate of Konoha is at stake, Itachi said. What's going on, Granny Tsunade? Pervy sage? Naruto asked. What happened to Konoha? 48 hours ago, Danzo Shimura orchestrated a coup. He hired the services of the Akatsuki and various rogue ninja and invaded Konoha. He had many supporters in all the clans and ninjas behind him, many we weren't even aware of. We were forced to retreat and regroup, Jiraiya said after some deliberation. Naruto sat there motionless. He didn't know who Danzo was, but just the idea of a coup disturbed him. This wasn't the Konoha he knew. Not the village old man Hokage taught him. Tsunade and I along with our Umbu retinue were ambushed by Akatsuki higher-ups. S-ranked rogue ninja like Kakuzu, Sasori, Kisame, Itachi over there, and various others attacked. Thankfully, Itachi turned on his former employers and helped us escape, Jiraiya continued. It was also then that we realized the sheer scope of the coup, Tsunade added. Danzo had been ready for years. I suspect he waited for Hiruzen to die to bloodlessly gain the position of Hokage, but my ascension put a stop to his plans. Majority of the ninja population, our own shinobi, turned on us. We headed for your hospital room immediately. The Akatsuki's primary target aside from assisting Danzo, was you, Itachi added. I was in the Akatsuki as a spy for Lord Third, but the mission to assist Danzo had been so sudden that I didn't get a chance to contact Jiraiya. Me? But why the Nine Tails, correct? Naruto sagged upon hearing the news. Seeing the three nod, he got his confirmation. It's always about the Nine Tails, he said bitterly. Like it or not, you Naruto Uzumaki is the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. You'll be among the primary targets of any attack. Danzo's coup was no different, we had to prioritize you, Itachi explained. Jinchu what? This was the first Naruto had heard the term. It means power of human sacrifice, Sakura said. I know what the word means, Naruto snapped but then stopped in an apologetic look. I guess it's fitting. Oi, is it really okay to let an S-class secret out just like that? Shikamaru said from the side. You all already know, Jiraiya said. Everyone basically knows, and Danzo's rather public attempts were seen by everyone. You're all trusted individuals after all. I suspect the other nations will get involved soon. It'll be dangerous if word got out, Shikamaru said frowning. I see, Naruto didn't know how to feel. He had woken up to a world completely different from what he'd known. What even was the world going on anymore? Naruto was offered food and water afterwards. He still struggled to wrap his head around the events that transpired. Things had been so simple just weeks earlier. At least Sasuke was back with them, kind of. The Uchiha was silent nowadays. Though he was left alone, the animosity towards him was palpable. The kid himself also seemed to be racked with guilt. Especially after hearing about Neji, Kiba, and the others. In the middle of the night, Naruto perked up by a slight tussle in the bushes. He'd been sitting outside on a log whilst being covered in bandages just thinking to himself when he heard it. He wasn't the only one. As highly trained professionals, the ninjas in the camp caught on and reacted immediately. Before Naruto knew it, Root Umbu had invaded the camp. Chaos raged as Jonin-level ninjas duked it out across the camp. In the distance, Kakashi and another ninja who utilized jutsu that grew trees fought side by side. Naruto didn't recognize the latter but ran forth to help. It's the Jinchuriki, multiple root ninja were quick to zero in on Naruto. He barely managed to jump back dodging a punch that would have otherwise incapacitated him. They're here for me, Naruto realized as more root ninja arrived. Hundreds of them at once. No, they weren't all root, ninjas who sided with Danzo were here. Naruto! What are you doing? Get out of here, Kakashi said as his Chidori cut apart a root operative. Yamato and I've got this handled. Go to the other genin, we're evacuating the camp. But I can, he said before his sensei cut him off. Right now you'll be of no help. Naruto, join with the others while we take of things, his sensei proceeded to run off to battle once more. He threw up multiple hand size and blasted multiple fireballs at the enemy. Around him, Itachi and Guy engaged more ninjas. Tsunade was tangling with a bandaged old man who created trees with his jutsu. The Lady Hokage appeared furious as she punched apart the wood. Naruto ran through this, being herded away from the main force. Even Iruka had shown up to drag him away. Come on Naruto, you have to get away, Iruka said pushing the blonde back. His Kana quickly parried another Chunin who came at the boy. Iruka, see sense. What good has the fox boy ever done for us? Let Lord Danzo have him and he'll show you mercy, the enemy ninja cried. This is wrong, Konoha shouldn't be fighting Konoha, Naruto couldn't believe what he was seeing. It was one thing to be told, but another to see it. Stop this isn't what Grandpa Hokage would have wanted, he shouted at the top of his lungs, hoping someone may listen. Nine Tails Jinchuriki, the bandaged old man, Danzo called out. Come with us and we'll welcome everyone back into the fold. Konoha needs to be united. How dare you even say that? Tsunade punched the ground where Danzo stood. She shattered the very earth beneath with a single strike. After you defiled my grandfather, your own sensei. It was necessary for the good of Konoha, Danzo defended. He produced several hand seals and breathed out streams of fire. It was then that Naruto noticed the man's right arm, embedded with multiple Sharingans. The sight made him want to vomit. The camp rumbled as dozens of corpses carved into pieces fell to the ground. The gallant Percy Sage, Jiraiya arrived with a thud. On his shoulders sat two toad-looking things. Jiraiya himself also appeared quite monstrous with all the features of a toad. Listen to them, the battlefield is too dangerous at the moment, Jiraiya growled. Join the evacuation efforts, we're leaving. Turning towards Danzo, Jiraiya said, you're not walking out of this alive. Obeying the wiser man, Naruto ran off into the forest. He trusted his elders to defeat the root leader. Danzo too seemingly gulped. Defeating Jiraiya for him was an impossibility. This was even more so now that he was surrounded by the likes of Jiraiya and Tsunade. However, he had another trick up his sleeve. A pity, I didn't want to do this, Danzo said. His wooden arm embedded by sharing reached for his bandaged forehead. Jiraiya widened his eyes. He leapt forwards towards Danzo with a Rasengan fully charged in hand. Tsunade, look away! He roared. Koto Tsukumi. Come on, where are they? Naruto sprinted through the thick foliage. The sound of flowing water was ever present as his sole companion. Hey, dead last, over here, the Inuzuka scion waved towards Naruto. Akamaru was by his side as always. Kiba. Naruto smiled. He jumped up the trees to reach his friend. You're late, everyone else is already moving ahead. Where the hell were you? Kiba asked. You can't expect me to run while they're still back there, Naruto cried. Yeah, I know, Kabi sighed. I get the feeling too. Mom will kill me if I don't obey. Waiting for them were dozens of Chunin and Genin along with some special Jonin. Naruto could see many friends with them. Even Sasuke was standing off to the side. Sasuke! Naruto called out. HN the Uchiha grunted but otherwise looked down. Let's get outta here first, he offered. The group jumped from tree to tree. But it was not long before they were attacked again. More root ninjas showed up much to Kiba's and Naruto's complete shock. What the? Weren't the Jonin holding them back? Shikamaru was taken aback. You kids are the future, the older ninja said. I don't know what's up but we'll hold them back. But as he said so, the trees collapsed beneath a giant swirling ball of light. No, it was a massive Rasengan that shredded everything in its wake. Naruto looked up and saw the face of an emotionless Jiraiya. What the? He said in utter confusion. Jiraiya wasn't coming for the root ninja, he was coming for them. The sudden attack collapsed the branch Naruto had been standing on. He fell for roughly onto the forest ground with a crunch. Crying out in pain, he looked down to see his leg bent in an unnatural direction. Multiple root came at him. But in the nick of time, snake summons fought them off. For a second Naruto thought it was Orochimaru, but instead it was the same woman with purple hair from the Chunin exams. Naruto hopped up on one leg using the trunk of trees as support. He struggled in pain but quickly felt himself get better. He looked down at the steady flow of red chakra. Fox, he growled. He hobbled forwards grimacing. Things were happening too quickly. Why had Percy Sage turned on everyone when moments ago, he seemed hell-bent on killing Danzo? Had the old man done something to him? Naruto's feeling of danger, long ingrained from years of pulling pranks, kicked up a fuss. He there himself to the side dodging a giant dog. It looked to be painting something made of ink. That was if paintings came alive and attacked people. A root ninja jumped into view. He wore a creepy umbu mask with a downward arc for a mouth, empty black sockets for eyes and circular red markings. On his back was a tanto blade. Shadow clone jutsu, Naruto created dozens of clones who all ran forwards to engage the root in combat. Another clone meanwhile charged up a Rasengan in his hand. The root drew his blade and began cutting apart his clones. Multiple ink creatures in the shape of dogs and birds also attacking, ripping his makeshift army apart. Rasengan. Naruto jumped for a powerful offensive. He was about to hit the root when the ninja substituted for his large ink dog who suffered beneath the blow. Another beast in the shape of a falcon rammed into Naruto's side, hurling him into a tree. The blonde groaned in pain, still feeling the injuries he previously had. Come on Fox, now's the perfect time to heal, he grunted. The root ninja, who was similar in height to himself, ran forwards. His fist was arced back for a knockout punch. The screech of 1,000 birds rang from above the trees. The root ninja jumped back to avoid the Chidori of Sasuke Uchiha, who had arrived in the nick of time. What are you doing, idiot? Sasuke said with mirth. You really letting this loser get the better of you? Heh, bastard, Naruto got up holding his side. The two boys cried in unison and engaged the root ninja. Danzo's private army were all highly trained and highly skilled. Each of them were more advanced than the average Chunin and many were on par with Jonin. Sasuke and Naruto fought in tandem. The ink user struggled under the pressure multiple clones from Naruto and the deadly offensive power of Sasuke's fireball and Chidori. But as they were getting the upper hand, another figure arrived. Jiraiya, with all the look of an emotionless drone, appeared before Naruto and Sasuke. Behind him was the old man, Danzo. Sasuke's eyes widened at Danzo's arms. His face snarled in a furious rage. You scum, he howled, running forwards with Chidori. Danzo scoffed. He kicked the uchiha air with his leg, sending him tumbling into the ground. What did you do to pervy sage? Naruto growled. Danzo scoffed. What had to be done, he said. Nine Tails Jinchuriki, you will come with us. Shadow Clone Jutsu, Naruto placed both hands fingers together and generated an army of clones. He flooded the forest with copies of Naruto and disappeared beneath a sea of blondes. After them, Danzo commanded. Naruto ducked and weaved, carrying Sasuke through the forest. He could see glimpses of Danzo, Jiraiya and multiple root ninja cutting his clones apart. He barely registered them, just another statistic in a sea of Narutos. His foot came to a grinding halt as he reached a waterfall. The river below was a big one that ran straight to the ocean. Stop Naruto, Sasuke said, regaining himself and standing to the side. Leave me here and join with the others. We were making way towards the capital for the daimyo support. What? But Sasuke, I didn't drag your ass back only for you to get kidnapped again, he insisted. Shut it, idiot, they're not after me. They're here for you, if you let them get you then we're all fucked. They'll have access to the Nine Tails. They could do whatever they did to Jiraiya to you, Sasuke yelled at the blonde. The sound of Rasengan tearing through the forest drew both boys' attention. Danzo walked out of the forest with Jiraiya in tow. It seems the academy wasn't all coddling after all. You two are talented, a shame you aren't in root, Danzo said. Sasuke gritted his teeth. Damn you, he thought as he watched Danzo's swinging right arm. Danzo's bandages were all removed, his right eye flashed in the Mangekyo Sharingan. Sasuke didn't know whose it was, but he could make an educated guess based on all those he knew. What he arrived on didn't please him one bit. Naruto clenched his teeth. Watching the Percy sage like this hurt. Where was Tsunade? Had she been killed? What happened to Kakashi-sensei? Yeah. Naruto charged forwards. His eyes flashing in red. Jiraiya was on him in an instant. His punch flew into the Jinchuriki's stomach. Gah! Naruto collapsed onto his knees. The red bubbles around him stayed strong as his whisker marks appeared more and more feral. Yeah! Naruto punched Jiraiya into the face, sending the older man dozens of meters away in a single strike. In the next moment, Danzo arrived before him. His blows hit a lot harder and in several exchanges, Naruto tumbled back. He groggily got to his feet between pants. Fire style, fireball jutsu, Sasuke unleashed a massive stream of fire. It was unlike his usual smaller fireballs. This time, he poured so much chakra into it and even the cursed mark had appeared on his body. Danzo held out his arms blocking the flames with chakra enhancing his body. He performed several hand signs and raised up a stone wall. Sasuke felt cold sweat. He felt completely helpless, just like that night had been. Now, these men were going to take his best friend. Best friend, when did he start considering Naruto as such? Hey idiot, Sasuke said. The flames still blazing before them. Huh? Was the only reply he received. Live, with that, he kicked Naruto off the ground, down the waterfall, and into the running river below. The young Emperor Gaotai was thrown into a river with a famously strong current. Whether intentional or not, Sasuke's blow knocked the young emperor in a one-way trip to the open ocean. Though this was a blessing in disguise. For days on end, the emperor will be washed across the ocean. His weak body unable to overcome the rapid tides. If not for the Duke of Chi, Sage Fox Kurama, Emperor Gaotai would have perished. Fortunately, the alien healing energies of the Nipponese-tailed beasts, chakra, managed to keep the emperor alive for many days to come. Eventually, fishing vessels from the state of Qi then ruled by the tyrannical Zhao Jun will find the emperor, nearly drowned and starved for food. Life of the highest supreme. One of the biggest mysteries of our world is the isolated barrier that separated the lands we call Nippon from the rest of the known world. Before the arrival of Emperor Mingran into the lands of Et, this section of the world was shrouded in a magical force field. Legends has it that thousands of years ago, an alien god descended into the warring lands of Nippon. This deity would eventually come into conflict with the mighty dragons of Et, differing from their Valyrian cousins. These dragons were said to be serpentine in stature, capable of using complex magics, speech, and shape-shifting. They were ageless creatures and masters of the Eastern world. This war would last for a decade. A war fought on a scale beyond what humans were capable of. Legend had it that these beings were capable of destroying mountains, draining seas, and tearing continents apart with their prowess. Nevertheless, what the Et call the alien god will retreat to Nippon. This god will forever shroud that part of the world in a barrier that isolated it forever. Scholars and astromancers from Et have described this as a separate universe that distorts the concept of time and space. Mysteries of the Eastern World, Maester Brian, Citadel. Live, Sasuke's voice brought confusion into his mind. It wasn't until the sharp pain in his abdomen that he realized his friend had kicked him. His eyes met the black-hair Uchiha's own three-tomo red-orbed Sharingan. Those eyes filled with regret and sadness. His own blue globes could only stare in shock as he fell. Sasuke performed the hand seals necessary for the Chidori. He could only stare as his friend turned back around and ran out of view. The chirping sounds of 1,000 birds and grunts of men fighting were the last things he coherently heard before he impacted the water. No, why are Konoha shinobi fighting each other? We're all a part of the same village, we all came from the same academy, the same home. Why would you all turn on us? If it was me, I'd understand. But it wasn't just me, but Granny Tsunade, Pervy Sage, Sasuke, Sakura, Shikamaru, Kiba, Choji, Niji, Hinata. Deep within him, the nine-tailed fox scoffed. This is the nature of humans, brat. Don't be so shocked, his deep voice rumbled behind him. Your third Hokage was both a naive fool and a hypocrite. Shut up, he yelled back. The sewage-like space where he stood was filled by nothing but damp water. A single massive cage lay before him and within it, the nine tails. Don't talk about us that way, you don't know what you're talking about. He screamed desperately. Don't fool yourself, you know perfectly well of which I speak. You don't live to be as old as I without witnessing these things firsthand, the fox scoffed. His orange-furred head moved back into the shadow. Wallow in your own pity for all I care, just make sure not to drag me into it. Water, so much water. He was drowning, he realized. Water filled his lungs as he moved rapidly along with the current. Bursting out of the surface, he thrashed around weakly to no avail. The river was too large and he was too weak, too injured. He soon fell back into the water. This time, red chakra bubbled to the surface. The energy of the nine tails gave him the strength he needed to push to the surface. As if it too was crying, the land of fire was covered in a thunderstorm. Trees had fallen over into the river and one so happens to be nearby. He gripped onto it with all he had. Using it as support, he drifted helplessly further and further away from where he had fallen. Naruto opened his eyes steadily. That dream again, huh, he whimpered. Pushing the blankets aside, he sat up from his enormous bed. Naruto's room wasn't like his childhood home. It was big, massive, filled with luxurious furniture, mirrors, and a massive bed of silk sheets and pillows. A chamber for a king. The morning sunlight drifted in from the window. Naruto glanced outside, catching sight of some birds too far away for him to identify in his groggy morning mind. Stretching, he got up and walked towards the mirror he kept at the edge of the room. One big enough for him to see himself fully. Faint scars ran across his chest, long healed. His muscles visible and strong, unlike the often malnourished form he had in his youth. The miracles of a healthy diet. His hair was longer now, stretching to his mid-back similar to the style the native people often liked to dress. He still didn't know how to feel about that, it was too long for his liking. But his wife insisted as well as his ministers. "Show that you're one of us," they said. Naruto sighed, at least it didn't usually get in the way too much. Reaching to his cupboard, he searched for plastic bowls of ramen. Only to feel disappointment at having found none. "None again, huh? Heh, you'd think I'd get used to that by now, you know," he sighed. "Well, I'll see what other food's ready." The Emperor's chamber doors pushed open as Naruto, dressed in his imperial black and orange robes and a beaded crown, strolled out. His posture was one of power, dignity, and demanded respect. The two men, dressed in gold and silver armor in the style of a dragon, bowed as he passed them. They each held long halberds, a circular shield. Crossbows hung from their sides. Celestial Dragon Guard, the cream of the crop soldiers Huaxia had to offer. Imperial soldiers who personally protected the emperor and the capital. The bravest and most powerful of warriors. Yet these proud men, hardened in battle, bowed their heads in subservience and reverence towards Naruto. They trotted behind him, weapons in hand, ready to defend him at a moment's notice. More guardsmen stood lining the corridor leading towards Naruto's sleeping chamber. Men who'd been standing for the entire night dutifully guarding. Men who followed after their sworn emperor one after the other. Their steel footsteps rang louder than Naruto's own. A retinue of a dozen celestial dragon guards followed Naruto by the end. The celestial palace was an enormous structure, more of a city than a palace really. It was wholly unlike anything from Naruto's youth. Grand building complexes adorned with the iconography of the dragon and the phoenix. Symbols for virtues, texts of great deeds. It was a place of grandeur and authority. Any who'd come to this place will instantly feel overwhelmed, tiny in comparison. A power play if there ever was one. A grand home for a grand king. The courtyard leading up to the main Grand Heavens Pavilion stood at the center of the celestial palace. Naruto and his retinue arrived, passing over many maids and servants who'd bowed as he passed. A red-haired man wearing a loose orange hanfu stood with his arms folded. His features were rough and aggressive. This man was not large, but he still felt very imposing. There was just a naturally aggressive air around him. "Ah, you're finally here, brat," he said. Naruto smiled. This was one of the few men who dare call him that. It was something he felt like he needed nowadays. The celestial dragon guards behind Naruto made no response. They were like solid carvings of stone in the way they acted. This wasn't a normal occurrence, however. If it was any other man, even a noble, the guards would rip them apart for showing such disrespect. But this man, the Duke of Chi, was different. He was a brother to their emperor and a famed hero in the nation's unification wars. "It's very early in the morning, Kurama," Naruto sighed. "Besides, I'm never late. The designated time is when I arrive," he said with mirth. "Heh, whatever you say, Kurama shrugged. The nine-tailed fox had changed greatly over the decades. He'd long learned the shape-shifting magic of the local demon clans and mainly stayed in this human form. Naruto turned his head around. Another squadron of celestial dragon guardsmen were approaching. Naruto nodded and turned back towards the dozen soldiers following him. "Men, thank you for the hard work and make sure to get some rest," he instructed. "For your hard work, you may take an extra cut of silver when you leave. If nothing else, dismissed." "We thank your majesty for your grand generosity," his guard said, saluting in reverence. One by one, they left the courtyard, replaced by a fresh batch who'd arrived for their shift to begin. "Come on, I've a court to host," Naruto called Kurama over and the two began ascending the steps towards the Grand Heavens Pavilion. His friendship with his former prisoner was an odd one. In his youth, Naruto would have never thought of befriending the fox. It was just something that wasn't done. You don't just befriend a demon, a monster. But here in Huaxia, where demons walked among men, people like Kurama were dime a dozen. Not tailed beasts of course, but animals who learned the ways of magic and learned to transform into men. They were closer to yokai of his homeland's myths than true demons. Thinking about his homeland brought melancholy to him. The elemental nations were always on his mind. Fleets of ships sailed out of Chi all the time on expeditions in search of it. Yet none had garnered any results. It was simply not there. He'd looked upon ancient maps that possessed the elemental nations, maps thousands of years old. He'd even spoken with grand astromancers, experts in the field of studying stars, known wise men who used magic of the heavens in combat. Yet still, he had gained little grounds. Even Kurama had not been of much help. That land existed, of that the two were certain. But it seemed impossible to reach. He wondered how his old friends were doing. It had been 2 decades, so he was sure they would have been able to retake Konoha. He would love to show them all what he built in the past 5 years. More than a decade of war and 5 years of peace. The Golden Empire of Huaxia was one he was proud of. Naruto sat upon his celestial dragon throne. A step above all others, even Kurama who respectfully stood to the side. The blonde appeared very imposing. His friendly warm expression froze in an ice-cold mask. Ministers trailed in carrying the day's reports. These old men and women, some magistrates of their own provinces, others nobles of ancient clan, former powerful military personnel were also present. Men and women from all sorts of backgrounds, be they rich or poor. Yet they all shared one commonality. They all served Naruto, or as they knew him, Emperor Gaotai, the highest supreme. Naruto's head rested on his knuckle. He idly listened to the chatter going on around him. The representative from the Order of Astromancers reported the movements of the stars, the fortune for the year, and anything stellar related. The magistrates reported on their cities, growth and income and whatnot. Various other things that, while tedious, were also necessary for the running of an empire, especially a newly created one. Though 5 years old, the empire had just been able to stabilize its economy with a unified currency measured in silver. Many of the technological and societal advancements Naruto wanted to establish were still in the process of gaining ground. Huaxia was in some ways much more advanced than the elemental nations, yet in others, they lagged behind. Huaxia was extremely advanced in the ways of magic and the use of gunpowder. They could do things the chakra using shinobi never could, such as fortune-telling and enchanting. Yet they lacked computers, toilets, lights, things he'd taken for granted as a child. It had been a true challenge figuring out how such things worked with the local engineers and artisans. Eventually though, he'd gotten the toilets made to a usable degree, otherwise he wouldn't know how he'd exist here. "Your Majesty, news had arrived concerning Prince Yang," someone said. Naruto perked up at the mention of his son. 13 years old and yet already a highly skilled warrior, Naruto Uzumaki was his eldest son. He'd previously stayed in a palace before asking to go on a trip. Being the man he was, Naruto offered his son a great many freedoms. One of them was the ability to decide for himself. Call it a remnant from his training as a ninja, but his allowed his son to make adult decisions. "What of him?" Naruto asked. There was a bit of incident regarding the prince's party. It was in relation to the city lord of Nanchen, that minister said. Nanchen, that is a major town in Chu, that's very far south. Kurama looked curiously at Naruto. "What's he doing all the way down there?" "My son wishes to get familiar with the southern provinces. He's already familiar with the northeast and hence decided to make a trip south," Naruto said. If I recall, Nanchen is very close to the Shadowlands. "Those aren't exactly what I'd call safe lands," Kurama said. "I trust Natsuo to make his own judgment. The part where nobody will be dumb enough to attack the crown prince was left unstated." Naruto's grip on power wasn't a weak one. Secret police, black ops units, spies, a powerful military, in order to maintain the peace and harmony he sought, these were necessary steps. As much freedom as Naruto gave him, it was still necessary for Natsuo to travel with a mini army. 500 men consisting of 100 celestial dragon guards followed him. Each of them were worth more than 100 elite warriors. Not to mention the famed Lu Han, one of the greatest warriors in all the lands, was with him. Someone Naruto trusts with his life. What was the issue he faced? Naruto asked. According to City Lord Yi, he interfered with the handling of justice and blew things out of proportion, the minister said. Naruto sighed. Of course it was, he couldn't say it was a surprise. That son of his always had a strong sense of justice. In southern parts of the land, far away from the capital, his laws weren't obeyed as thoroughly as the imperial provinces. It was also a learning experience for the prince. Thankfully, both sides came to an agreement. But the city lord did file a complaint that arrived late last night, that same minister said. Che, a mere city lord of an unimportant southern town, thinks he has the right? A nobleman spat. Your Majesty, give me the order and I'll personally go and discipline them. No need, this is a small matter, Naruto waved the concern away. Some of these men were always a bit overzealous when it comes to violence. My son is able to make decisions on his own. If he cannot deal with this, then he has no right being crown prince, Naruto said harshly. Though deep down he resented those words. The world of monarchs was tough. He had to constantly put on a show of strength. Only in private could he be more relaxed. Later that day, Naruto sat in his office going over reports on the state of Chu. The southernmost part of Huaxia was also the furthest away from the central imperial power. But at the same time it was also one of the strongest states economically speaking. This was because it housed the massive port city of Yinlei there. It was an economic powerhouse bringing in trade from the western parts of the world. The final destination of many trade voyages by way of sea. At the same time, it was also the city where former great dynasties chose for their capital. Their current reigning duke was also the former self-styled Emperor Zhangjiao, who was among the last to bow to Naruto. Naruto sighed. Things were much changed in Huaxia in the times since he arrived. During his early years, the southern lands constantly split between being united under one dynasty or split into several states. These lands would almost always start successfully with their proud emperors before eventually declining. These rulers styled themselves after a multitude of colors such as gray, white, red, pearl. Even Zhang Jiao used to call himself the Azure Emperor before Naruto put an abrupt stop to that. The north on the other hand had always suffered incursions from the Chaos Plains. The land where the Jogos Nai Kaganates were largely the western portions. But what truly posed a danger were the eastern portion. Chaos demons roamed those lands, monstrous creatures serving dark gods that made even Naruto uneasy. This was why his seat was so far north, to forever hold vigil against these creatures. Naruto held up a paper detailing the current state of Chu. He read it, then double-checked it, then read it again. Zhang Jiao rules his lands well, he sighed. I find no faults in his style. He has taken to my laws well, and I do remember him calling them the pinnacle of righteousness. The emperor looked towards the other guest in the room. Kurama, who sat opposing the emperor of Huaxia. It's not Zhang Jiao that's the problem. Chu traders who come to my port sometimes sow dissent among my own. They call you a foreigner undeserving of the mandate of heaven, Kurama said after taking a sip of his tea. According to Xian Yin's agent's reports, some of the lords under Zhang Jiao has also shown similar sentiments. I say we nip the problem in the bud before it grows to an all-out rebellion, the fox said. They haven't done anything overt, Naruto shook his head. No crimes had been committed. I can't in good conscience condemn innocent people. They stopped being innocent the moment they thought ill of you, brat, Kurama scoffed. The shoguns of old of the elemental nations thought the same as you. Why do you think the daimyos rule now? Naruto mulled over Kurama's words. Perhaps he was optimistic, but he thought those lords would come around eventually. It's already been 5 years since he was enthroned. Not to mention their proximity with the Shadowlands. Those connections bode ill for us, Kurama added. Naruto nodded. That unease regarding those lands was perfectly justified. Even Kurama was creeped out by those parts when he visited all those years ago. Ashai, the city of sorcerers and capital of the Shadowlands. A place where dark magic run rampant, where the foulest of experiments were permitted. Unlike Huaxia, where magic was strictly regulated, the Shadowlands suffered no issue. As such, many aspiring sorcerers were lured away and joined the shadows away from Huaxia's light. A festering disease that was allowed to grow too strong. An act allowed by the previous dynasties too busy with internal and immediate northern threats. Even for a united Huaxia under Naruto, fighting a war against Ashai was extremely difficult and taxing. A consequence of having enemies on all borders. The size of the empire had also become its weakness. I wouldn't worry too much at the moment. Xian Yin's agents report no such plans brewing within Ashai. And what's more, the Shadow Pan follows Natsuo's footsteps. But you are right, Kurama, I'll look into your concerns, Naruto said. That's all I ask. Kurama placed down his cup of tea. I gotta head home soon, the Eastern Fleet would be returning by the end of the month and I need to be there to greet them. That's fine, Naruto said. Dodo, you think they'll have news about the elemental nations? Kurama looked at Naruto for a few moments. Then his eyes went downcast. I don't know, Naruto, he admitted. I wouldn't hold out much hope for it. It's been 20 years, not a short time for you humans. I don't know if we'll ever see it, to be honest. Naruto joined him in silence. He crossed his fingers across from his face as he contemplated. 20 years of searching, any free time in between the wars he'd do so. 20 years spent trying to discover just how he got to these lands. Naruto glared his own somewhat tanned skin in frustration. These lands had records of his home, he'd seen it. But he just can't find the damn place. Keep searching, we'll find it no matter what, Naruto said with resolve. Very well, wasn't going to stop in the first place, Kurama grumbled. Whatever the case, even my old man wasn't aware of Huaxia. I won't hold out hope, but the possibility is still there. Kurama turned back to Naruto. By your leave, your majesty. Heh, get out of here, Chi needs you. Freya Warhar. A youth with blonde hair that ends with silver tips yawned loudly, uncaring about his surroundings. My prince, cover your mouth when you yawn, a gruff Asian-looking man with a sheathed sword said with disapproval evident in his eyes. He was tall and broad with muscles fitting neatly into his armor. His metallic armor was stylized in the style of a tiger. His hair was tied into a short ponytail and his beard neatly trimmed. This was the ferocious Lu Han, the emperor's personal bodyguard. Or at least he normally was the emperor's personal bodyguard. Meh, Natsuo, the young prince dismissed with a wave of his palm. There's no one around us in the first place, so what are you worried about? It's proper etiquette, your mother will be most displeased if she finds you doing this, Lu Han lectured. Dad lets me, the prince argued. Your father lets you get away with too much, Lu Han said. The prince smiled with mirth and scratched the back of his head. And stretched his back until a piping sound was heard before he hunched over the table again. The two were currently staying within a merchant's compound in Nanchen. After what happened with the city lord, Natsuo opted to just stay at the largest place that was large enough to house the celestial dragon guards. It was childish and he knew it, but the city lord really ticked him off with his snobbish attitude and his treatment of civilians. Of course, the merchant clan was overjoyed to get imperial attention. He gladly succeeded parts of his own home. Though some of the dragon guards still had to find inns on their own around town. The room they were in wasn't anywhere near as luxurious as the celestial palace. While high class, it was quite ordinary in Natsuo's eye. The round table they sat around was some supper for the prince. The trial of the thief had taken well into the evening. Overextended for a simple common thief if one were to ask the nobles. But Natsuo was determined to help the man. But still, that trial took forever, he whined. Are trials always like this? You kept pushing on, that's why it took so long, Lu Han said. It was justice. That man was forced into it. His family lives in poverty and his mother's sick. Why should he get the same treatment as those despicable bandits in the mountains? Natsuo said. It's an affront to my father's laws. It's an unfortunate reality we have to face. That thief crossed paths with an offended city lord Yi. Such things were fairly common. He was lucky to have met you, luckier to get out with his life, Lu Han said with a downcast look. Were things really that bad? The prince asked. I can't say, it was simply life as we knew it. The High Lords did what they wanted. Maybe in Qin, things were different. But in my homeland in Qi, it was arguably worse, Lu Han sighed. His Majesty did a lot of good things for Huaxia. Much of them relates to the peasantry. But the dynasty is still too young, stretched too thin. These things take time, Lu Han said. Natsuo frowned and ate his food in silence. Mother should have done something about it. Her Majesty wouldn't care, she still doesn't. If His Majesty wasn't so adamant about it, she and her family wouldn't even bother. That's the reality of the situation. The powerful are often disconnected from those below them, Lu Han said. Thank you for the wisdom, Master Lu, Natsuo said. It's what I'm here for, my prince. Later that night, while Natsuo slept, Lu Han walked into an alleyway discreetly. He wasn't wearing his armor, rather he was adorned in peasant clothing. His hair was disheveled, making recognizing him extremely difficult. Another man was already waiting for him. One cloaked in black, a red scarf and a large bamboo hat. He wore an emblem on his chest, one split into 4 quadrants each depicting an animal. On the top was a turtle, on the right was a dragon, on the bottom was a pheasant, and on the left was a tiger. Lord Turunju, Lu Han cupped his hand and saluted the figure. Master Lu Han, Turunju greeted back. I'll admit, I didn't think much of this mission. Took it as a vacation of sorts. But it seems I was wrong. Is the Lord Yi truly conspiring with Shadowland sorcerers? Lu Han asked. Not as high itself, otherwise Her Majesty definitely would have informed us. I suspect it's another sub-faction within the city or perhaps even outside of it. As high is hardly the only power in the Shadowlands, Turunju said. Will he be a danger to the prince's life? Hard to say, as much as I hate to admit, not all as high sorcerers are monsters. This'll warrant further investigation, Turunju said, looking towards the distant Yi clan complex. I'll have to trouble you then, the royal guard said. It's the Shadow Pan's duty after all, Turunju said before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Lu Han blew away the smoke and made his way outside. Things are getting a bit complicated, he thought to himself. He awoke in a stupor. Atop a rocking fishing vessel with a fisherman and his daughter. They said something to him but he couldn't register before falling into the sweet embrace of unconsciousness. The last sound he registered was the prisoner within him frantically calling out. What's going on? What happened? Where are you? Where are we? Why can't I feel them anymore? The fox cried. If he'd been awake then, he would have realized the fox had been panicking. The next couple of days passed in a blur. The fisherman and his daughter brought him to the local doctor, or at least what qualified as a doctor. Honestly, he felt so weak here that he was barely aware at the time. Everything had felt so wrong. The air, there was something intrinsically different about it that it felt alien to him. There was something missing from it. He'd also struggled with communication. He couldn't understand their words. They too cannot understand him. But they showed him kindness, helped him when they didn't need to. Rescued him when they didn't have to. It restored his faith in Lord Third's teachings. He didn't know where he was, and that stayed that way for days. Eventually, the communication problem was solved. There was a scholar living in the village. A learned man who was returning from a major city for a vacation. By chance he happened upon the man who was practicing his essay at the time. Kanji, he realized. The startled scholar, and he soon learned that he could read the local language. That was the starting point in him learning to speak the language. I want to go home, he said time and again. Which way to the capital? He asked. My friends are there to speak with the daimyo, he learned to say. The kind scholar offered to take him to the capital. Little did he know, through miscommunication, he thought he meant the capital of Qi. The state of Qi was the nation he was in. It was ruled by a king named Zhao Jun, a skilled warrior with many victories against the rival states of Qin and Yen. It was after arriving at the capital of Qi did he realize something was wrong. He was able to get a hold of a proper map there too. He wasn't anywhere near the Land of Fire. In fact, the Land of Fire wasn't even on the goddamned map. Busy reminiscing, Naruto turned his head away from the sunset. The setting sun had painted the horizon of clouds in a beautiful shade of orange. A miraculous sight that never ceases to amaze the emperor no matter how many times he'd seen it. Placing down his cup of wine, Naruto began addressing the man who'd come up to him. "Yi Fan, you old dog, when did you arrive?" he said with a laugh. Yi Fan was a giant of a man. He easily towered over the emperor at a staggering 9 foot tall. His physique was ripped with muscle indicating a humongous amount of physical strength. His skin was also the color of charcoal, black as the night. But what really set him apart wasn't his height nor his muscles. It was his bull-shaped head. The head of a buffalo to be exact, complete with a short beard and a nose ring. His horns curled upwards like a crown and his eyes flashed with fondness. "Your Majesty, your servant returns triumphant." Yi Fan the bull man cupped his massive fists and bowed in respect to his liege. Naruto chuckled. "Yi Fan, we are brothers on the battlefield, you don't need to be so polite with me you know," the young emperor sighed playfully. "Ah, but your Majesty, you aren't like us now. You're the son of heaven, the emperor of Huaxia, a true person sage. It is only right I show you the proper respect." Yi Fan smiled. Naruto knew he wouldn't win the old cow. Hence he relented and waved his hand. Atop the balcony he sat on, another chair materialized beside his overlooking the celestial palace and the sunset beyond. "Say, what's up with the Eastern Palace?" Yi Fan asked as he sat down. "Looked like a pretty big frenzy." "No idea and honestly, I don't care. I've already retired for the day," the emperor said taking a sip of his wine. He raised his hand and telepathically raised a pitcher to pour some for the beast man. "So, how was it?" Naruto asked. "As easy as pie, old friend," Yi Fan said taking his own sip of wine. The Jogo's Nikon thought himself invincible, this old bull showed him otherwise. His head now joined his brethren in lining the eastern bastion and his body fed to the dogs. "Those horsemen are really getting daring lately," Naruto sighed. "They deny any offer of peace thrown at them and instead charge towards my lands with no hesitation. You'd think they'd learn after 5 years. The Jogos Nai were morons long before you arrived. Their barbaric culture and unearned pride has always been their defining traits," Yi Fan scoffed. "I don't understand why you keep showing them mercy, they'll never take it." Naruto sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Just maintaining the harmonious peace in Huaxia was taxing. Doing so outside was even more so. The most attempts he'd done for the Jogos Nai was simply arranging peace talks, yet they had always spat in his face. "I just want all the fighting to end," Naruto sagged in his seat. In these rare moments of privacy, where no celestial dragon guard was present nor ministers. Among friends who knew him well, he could finally show his true feelings. Yi Fan sighed and patted his friend on the shoulder. "I'm sorry for bringing down the mood, old friend. But there is simply no stopping the nature of living beings. It's not just human nature but an ingrained sense of conflict in all beings. Even the wisest of dragons to lowliest of men are susceptible to this. It shouldn't have to be." Naruto shook his head. He watched the closing day of the palace below. Though melancholic air may hang around his person, he truly treasured these years of peace. But even Naruto cannot deny the violence it took to bring this about. He'd sent millions of men to their deaths to achieve his dream. And as much as he hated, he'd condemn a million more to keep it. The sight of hundreds of thousands of corpses still haunted him. Bodies piled atop bodies. Men, women, yokai, children. How many had been sacrificed to bring about peace? Heavens, what has happened to me? Naruto pondered. He thought back to the old saying. You either die a hero or live to become a villain. He'd like to think he hasn't crossed the line yet. Your Majesty, Yi Fan said, observing Naruto's face. Mingren, Huaxia simply cannot afford any more conquest right now. I know, Naruto admitted. Defend, 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 that was all Huaxia can do right now. Their facilities were still damaged and many cities still had scars from the last chaos invasion. By the by, where did you get this wine? It's good, Yi Fan suddenly asked. Oh, it's wine imported from Qin. Yi Fan was slightly taken aback, so Ingzhen is good for something after all. Naruto bursted out in laughter. He doubled down and wheezed in good humor. The Emperor of Huaxia looked on towards the city. The sun had finally set and a veil of darkness had begun cloaking the city. Those small lights of lamps and lanterns were still visible in the distance. Then, an idea dawned on him. Say, Yi Fan. What say you and I leave for a bit? Explore the city, the lunar festival is supposed to be in a few days. You really going to leave the palace? What would all the ministers and guards think? Yi Fan exclaimed. They can put a sock in it for all I care. The court can exist without me, and besides, it's nightfall, people are already retiring for the night. Naruto waved him off. Should we inform the guards? Yi Fan pointed his thumb back towards the door whence he came. Nah, what's the point of sneaking out with people know? Naruto smirked. Wei Jin, grand capital of a unified Huaxia. The majestic city which held down the eastern end of the great bastion. The site of ultimate victory against the forces of chaos and their dark masters. Constructed on a slope, it was a city built for war with high walls and mounted cannons. The core forces of the imperial army garrisoned here along with the nation's elite fighters. A fortress enchanted with magic of the highest caliber, feng shui masters, and armed with weapons from the greatest of engineers. A combinations of massive terracotta sentinels, golems resembling the common soldier, yet standing over a dozen meters in height. These giants lined the outer and inner wars as well as all over Wei Jin. A total of 200 of them total placed in the city alone, a fifth of the total amount Huaxia possessed. Yet it wasn't all militaristic. It was also a hub of culture and fulfillment. It was a young city, but one strategically planned from the start to be able to withstand and win a siege. The Celestial Palace, also called the Divine Court of Heaven, wasn't a structure built in the city itself. Rather, the court of the Emperor of Huaxia was a mobile flying fortress floating several kilometers above Wei Jin itself. A constant reminder of the power of their chosen ruler. Naruto and Yi Fan flew steadily beneath a cloaking spell. They stealthily appeared above the rooftops of a pagoda before descending again to a lower elevation. Merchant District, Yi Fan called out. Moron, it's the middle-class living district, Naruto sighed. Hey, give me a break, I don't come to here often, Yi Fan excused himself. Besides, all you human buildings look the same to me. At least we know how to build. The two bantered as they walked out of the residential district. Wei Jin's nightlife was especially vibrant around this time. People were preparing for the upcoming lunar festival after all, and decorations were already being put in place. Some people thought to enjoy things early and wander the streets with all the lanterns and mooncakes. Naruto smiled at the sight. It brought back memories of simpler times. A reminder of where he came from. This was why he liked to sneak away to Wei Jin. Not as the emperor above all men, but as a fellow human living among them. It still amazes me how fast and tall the people here can build, Naruto thought as he wandered the streets with Yi Fan. Huaxia was a beautiful land. Though he'd always remember the elemental nations fondly, Huaxia too had become his home. A magical land of natural beauty unmarred by industrial complexes of more urban parts of the elemental nations. The lack of advanced technology had made him enjoy nature all the more. Even Konoha, which was rather rural and possessed a myriad of foliage, wouldn't compare to the vast lands of Huaxia. Wei Jin too carried a naturally mystical feeling to it. Almost like walking into a painting rather than a real place. Fruits of his hard labor. No, fruits of everyone's labor. The emperor and his friend trekked into the more bustling areas of town. It wouldn't compare to during the daytime, but it was just past sunset, so many people were still out. Ever since he'd installed the magical lamps that littered the streets. His ministers had called it a waste of finances, but he'd insisted. Too bad he didn't know how engineering worked, else he'd had placed in electrical lamps. The maintenance for magical lamps were quite high. The two crossed a bridge that spawned over a running river. The same one that crossed through Weijin from the mountains just north and the Great Wall that began from it. Things are really ramping up here, Naruto idly said, noticing a crowd gathering around a street. A crowd had gathered of considerable size. What's going on? Yi Fan thought to ask. Dun know, why don't we ask? Naruto walked up to a civilian who stood at the edge. The emperor's current dressing was a regular set of robes rather than his normal imperial ones. As such, he stood out a little less than usual. Hey there, Naruto called out. What's the occasion? He asked. The man he asked didn't look back, content to stare in amazement at the crowd. He was tiptoeing, trying to get a peek. It's the Dowager Empress. She's here personally, he said. Naruto raised his eyebrow. Dowager Empress? Mom. He pushed past the man who stumbled back. Hey, what's Thea? He grabbed Naruto's shoulder only to have his jaw drop as he recognized the face of the blonde. 1,000 apologies, Your Majesty, he exclaimed. However, Naruto ignored the man and strolled forwards. As he did so, the crowd, having heard the proclamation, parted like the Red Sea. Their eyes wide in both fear and awe. The same man earlier had began kowtowing and smacking his head on the pavement, muttering apologies. Yi Fan had to physically hold the poor man back so he wouldn't hurt himself. When Naruto got to the front, he was greeted with a sight of a woman entertaining a horde of young children. Dancing chains and puppets making a show for the kids. Kids from the ages of 3 to 7 awed and oohed at the sight. The woman doing so was one Naruto easily recognized. She was beautiful, much more so than a vast majority of people. With long crimson hair and round features. Kushina Uzumaki in the flesh. What are you doing here? Naruto called out. Huh? Ah, Naruto, his mother cried out. She looked back with slight embarrassment as she looked to the ground like a kid in trouble who'd been discovered. Well, you see. It was kinda lonely in the palace, so I found these kids and started playing with them, and then things kinda escalated, the Empress Dowager said with a small grin. I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't be out here. But the stuffy old men were just so boring, Kushina whined with a pout. Naruto sighed. It was a truly strange sight. A man calling a woman nearing his own age mother. Yet they were mother and son of flesh and blood. Though this situation along with his father's was still very awkward. So that was why the Eastern Palace was in an uproar a few hours ago, Naruto deadpanned. We still don't understand the full mechanics of your resurrection. Matters relating to chaos are very serious, I know it's hard, but... I understand, Kushina relented. It's just, Minato gets to go out and all. He volunteered to be garrisoned at the Dragon Gate, vastly different circumstances, Naruto deadpanned. His shoulders shagged and his smile faded. The Emperor didn't really know how to feel. He still didn't even after a year. He'd long accepted them as being dead, yet for them to suddenly appear in his life again at a time where he'd long reached adulthood. Heaven Sake, he was a father himself. Empress Dowager, Yi Fan greeted, stepping out from the side. Oh, please don't call me that. You are. We've never met, Yi Fan said. Oh, thank God, so many names. Kushina wiped the sweat off her forehead, cheeks flushed. I know, the army of clerks can be tough to remember, Yi Fan smiled. It's why I don't bother. It wasn't that Kushina was dumb or anything. It was just that the palace alone had ministers, clerks, guards, and servants numbering into the tens of thousands. And this was a lowball estimate. Konoha's ninja population didn't even reach 10% at last, she remembered. Though that was still early post-Third War, so things probably changed a lot in that time. "Come on, let's go back to the Pa," Naruto began saying but suddenly stopped. His head tilted to the side as the fingers of his left hand reached for the back of his ear. Kushina blinked her eyes in confusion. Is this some sort of that magic thing or? Someone's contacting His Majesty, Yi Fan said, crossing his arm. Looking at the crowd of unsure people, he called out, "Alright, show's over. You guys haven't done anything wrong. Go home and take a rest." As the crowd dispersed, he and Kushina turned back to Naruto expectantly. The Emperor met their gaze and sighed. "I hate it when this happens," he said, holding his forehead. "Peace is never easy, is it?" Like the silent shadow, Taranju, master of the Shadow Pan, snuck into the city lord's mansion. Technically, he was on a vacation doubling as an escort mission. It was the only real way to trap him in one, given how many he's denied. But for the Shadow Pan warrior, breaks did not exist. His paranoia had also paid off, as his suspicions were confirmed upon examining the mansion. Utilizing spells from Water Trigram, a thin veil of light enveloped the demon hunter. His position was invisible to the naked eye, and only advanced magics can detect him. As a talented and experienced warrior who'd seen countless battles, Taranju was a feng shui expert, someone who'd mastered all 8 trigrams of magic. Such a task was simple to him. "Let's see," he rummaged through the office area without a sound. His eyes flashed in other spells that saw through walls and sealed chambers. His nose wrinkled as he detected distinct odors. It smelled of a smoldering ember. Like a fire that had long gone out, mixed with the displeasure distinct from the corrupted lands of the Shadowlands. The Shadow Pan continued to detect such magics from deeper into the mansion. Most of it was hidden underneath barriers, but not things that were strong enough to keep him out. "Foreign magics," he concluded. "The foul taint of the shadows," he spat. He was highly tempted to assassinate the city lord right here, right now. But more evidence was needed. This could easily be planted. What's more, the source of the magic also needed to be investigated. Placing a pair of fingers on his ear, he messaged his emperor. Natsuo Uzumaki enthusiastically strapped the quiver onto his back. The 13-year-old then began tying the harness together so that structural integrity can be maintained. "You ready, my prince?" Lu Han asked from outside the room. "Yeah, just a bit," Natsuo called back. He quickly headed out and opened the door. "Let's go," he said. A bit under a week had passed since the trial of the thief, and the city lord had come back with another apology. This time, Natsuo accepted when the city lord also invited him to go out hunting with him and the local noble clans. It was a good offer, and one that allowed him to stretch his legs. Hence the son of Naruto accepted and brought along a retinue of his celestial dragon guards and bodyguard as protection. Riding out on horses, Natsuo, Lu Han, and a host of celestial dragon guard numbering 20 rode out after breakfast. They rode out of the city for a few kilometers outside the gates. Their destination was a large swath of foliage that spanned from this corner of Chu all the way into the lands of Qin. Many referred to it as the Beast Woods due to its higher than average population of animals. It didn't take long for the prince to catch up with the others of the hunt who'd arrived earlier than him. "Your Highness," these men greeted, kowtowing to the boy. "At ease, I'm here for the same thing you all are," Natsuo said with a smile. "Am I the last one here?" "No, that would be me, Your Highness." Natsuo turned around towards the new voice. Riding on a horse, a middle-aged man with a long beard and mustache in a classic oriental style sat there dressed in azure blue robes. "City Lord Yi," Natsuo greeted. "Your Highness," Lord Yi said, getting off his horse and bowing. He was a scholarly-looking man without any large muscles. But one shouldn't underestimate him. Lord Yi was one of Zhang Jiao's foremost mages and used to participate in battles all the time. Reportedly, he'd even clashed against the emperor more than a few times. It was a miracle he was even still alive after so long. "So Lord Yi, what's our target?" Natsuo eagerly said. As fun as exploring the countryside had been, he hadn't had much of a chance to get some action. Bandits were smart enough to avoid celestial dragon guard, and supernatural monsters avoided retinues of so much strength. Recent rumors had it that a giant boar had appeared in the edges of the forest, Lord Yi said. Normally we'd send men to drive it back into the deeper parts, but it may also be an entertaining experience for your highness. Boar? How big are we talking? Natsuo asked. Big, witnesses say at least the height of 5 men and can swallow men whole in a single bite, Lord Yi said. 5 men? Lu Han chimed in curiously. Something that size is usually living up in the Bone Mountains. It's rare to see something like that so far east. Probably just men exaggerating, Lord Yi said. Besides, the prince is a master of the 8 trigrams, it shouldn't be anything too difficult. Natsuo bashfully scratched the back of his head. Calling him a master of the 8 trigrams was a little too much. Sure, he could use a few, but master? That's a little too far out of his league. I understand your concern, Lord Yi told Lu Han and the dragon guards. But this area isn't known for dangerous beasts, you'd have to go a little further south towards the Shadowlands for that. It'll be fun, Lu Han, Natsuo insisted. By your will, the warrior relented and nodded. The party hunting this boar consisted of several dozen men. Members from important clans within Nanchen, including the city lord and the imperial prince. But compared to the former 2, these noble clans might as well be peasants. The party set off into the forest with haste. They were all given a map and told of locations where they shouldn't cross. Places that also had markers on them to signify danger zones. Overall, Lord Yi had made a lot of preparations. Lu Han informed Natsuo that the man has probably been preparing for the better part of the last couple of days. The trackers accompanying them soon managed to trace the creature's movements. Hey Lu Han, you think Lord Yi will eat the boar? Natsuo asked, attempting to make some chatter. Most likely, it'll be a waste not to, he said. Natsuo began saying, but trackers interrupted them. They came running back to their position in the forest. Footsteps were found. The beast is close, they said. The hunters immediately stopped their chatter and concentrated. Natsuo grabbed his bow and arrow and readied them. The weight of the bow felt awkward in the hands of the prince. He had trained with a bow before, but only a few times and years ago. In fact, the only reason he brought it was to fit in aesthetically with everyone else. In most cases, when his mother took him on hunts, he'd use his claws and teeth to win the fight. If his father took him, he'd practice his magic and martial arts, or taijutsu as his dad called it. Seeing the prince awkwardly fiddling with the bow and arrow, Lu Han sighed. He didn't mind the assignment, he was pretty much an uncle to the kid. But the brat can be a bit aggravating at times. Here, let me. Lu Han bent down and adjusted Natsuo's grip. When you draw, remember to relax and watch your footing, he said. Thanks Lu Han, Natsuo said, running forwards to join the rest of the hunters. He bolted to the front while the celestial dragon guards trailed after him in silence. They were the most stone-faced people ever. Super serious, super dutiful, and super boring. What's more, the lesser nobles were too scared to talk to the kid. Lord Yi, I want first at him, Natsuo enthusiastically said. Of course your highness, Lord Yi smiled. We'll be right behind you. Maybe he's not so bad after all, Natsuo thought. He snuck through the bushes quietly, using his ears to pick up sounds. His bow was drawn and ready. Using his ears, Natsuo picked up traces of a set of legs stealthily moving on the grass and leaf-infested lands. The foliage rustled as the creature approached their location. It's coming for us? He pondered. He trotted forwards and peeked through the bushes ahead of him. His eyes narrowed when he saw a thick leathery skin, green in color. Natsuo wrinkled his nose when a foul smell hit his nostrils. Then a wet splat hit his blonde and silver head. He looked up and saw the creature in its full height. That's not a boar, the prince quickly dodged to the right, skillfully avoiding a giant bite where his previous position was at. He aimed his arrow at the creature's head and released. But with a loud clang, the arrow bounced off of the creature's head, making the sound of metal against metal. My prince, get out of there, Lu Han's cry made Natsuo jump back as the creature bit at him again. Now further away, Natsuo got a better look at the beast. It was big, even more so than what Lord Yi had described. It was skinny but tall and was in the shape of a dog. There were small black hairs running all over its body. Its face was crooked, resembling a caricature of a human's face mixed with a dog's. Its head was humorously bigger in proportion with its body containing large sets of yellow teeth. It had no eyes visible on its face, just massive nostrils. Instead, it possessed one eye each on its shoulders. The same shoulders that connected to human-like front paws armed with nails. It's a Taotai, Lu Han cried racing forwards, his halberd ready. The Taotai caught off guard, flinched backwards as Lu Han's halberd cut into its face. The Taotai screamed and ran in another direction, kicking up a wave of leaves. It smashed into a tree, easily knocking it over, and picked it up and swung. A celestial dragon guard jumped in the way and halted the tree with his bare hands. Another guard ran up the tree and stabbed the Taotai through the face into the top portion of its jaw. The Taotai screeched. Its mouth unleashed a cloud of poisonous gas that forced the celestial dragon guards to jump back and defend. A nobleman nearby wasn't so lucky, however. He bought a whiff of the smoke and his face instantly changed. He toppled over gasping for breath, a look of horror on his face as he died. The Taotai trotted over and with a single bite, ate the man's corpse. Every back, Taotias are mystical creatures and highly dangerous, Lord Yi commanded. His palms lit up in fire as he made to blast the beast. His attacks shot through into the Taotai, who merely shrugged the hit off. Lu Han frowned. He twirled his halberd around ready to finish the creature. The celestial dragon guards had also prepared to do the same. No, let me take care of it, Natsuo insisted. He dropped the bow and arrow set beside his feet and stepped forward, stretching. Lu Han gave him an annoyed look before shrugging. Careful, he said. Natsuo smirked. Hey ugly, he cried, catching the Taotia's attention. As soon as the creature turned, the prince had already ran up to it. His following uppercut knocked the beast onto its back, crashing it through several trees. Are you insane? You're just letting the prince do so. A nobleman cried towards Lu Han and the dragon guards. These elite warriors merely nodded. The prince doesn't need our protection, not in this case, Lu Han said, much to the nobleman's shock and confusion. Natsuo sidestepped the Taotia's paw. He kicked the creature's side and grabbed the lower part of its jaw as it made to bite him. He then lifted and tossed the creature onto the ground before pummeling its chin with a punch of his own. The Taotai landed with a thud, struggling to handle Natsuo's enormous physical strength. A testament to the bloodline belonging to both his parents. The Taotai roared, not in rage, but in hunger. Even in its disadvantaged position, it made to bite Natsuo. It chewed through everything from rocks to wood to even spells Lord Yi had thrown at him. The Taotai flipped onto its feet as Natsuo blasted it with a bolt of concentrated lighting, burning at the surface of its skin. Then the prince decked it across the face, sending it flying into an elevation of rocks. Man, nothing can hurt this thing, Natsuo grumbled. His blue eyes began glowing in an amethyst color. Guess I'll have to hit harder. The Taotai was quickly back onto its feet. It roared in hunger and charged at the prince, who stood still. Hey, shouldn't you guys give him your weapons? His Highness' attacks aren't doing anything, a person watching said in panic. Taotais are known to be supernaturally tough. Our weapons are enchanted to penetrate creatures like that easily. But we've sworn not to interfere, Lu Han said. Besides, does it look like he's struggling? Natsuo smirked as he ran at the Taotai. The two's charge was broken when the Taotai opened its wide maw to bite, only for Natsuo to slide along the floor. The fact that it was covered in leaves made it all the more easier. His skin segmented themselves and his limbs elongated. He sprouted two antler-like horns from his forehead and twin catfish whiskers sprouted from his lip. His teeth sharpened and his nails became claws. Rising up from below the Taotai, the dragonic form of Natsuo dug his claws into the creature's back, drawing blood for the first time. The Taotai screeched in pain while the dragon roared in triumph. Natsuo lifted the beast into the air and hurled it into the ground. He then dived into the creature. His own claws slashing apart the Taotia's underbelly, carving out a bloody scene. Natsuo's serpentine body then wrapped itself around the Taotai. His physical strength was more than capable of restraining the hungry demon. Natsuo's front limbs pulled at the Taotia's head and twisted it in an unnatural direction. Struggling, the Taotai was unable to move as the life drained out of it. With a loud crack, Natsuo forced the creature's neck to snap, killing it. The Taotai fell to the ground with a thud. Its head faced the back of its body as the dragon untangled itself. The rumors are true, a nobleman whispered. The imperial clan are dragons. Standing triumphant, Natsuo's dragon form smiled. His whiskers danced in the wind as the 10 meters long dragon did a little dance. Later that day, during the dead silence of the night, Lord Yi kicked his chair into the wall. "Damn it, that wasn't supposed to happen," he screeched. "You were hasty," a lecturing voice snorted. "Did you really think a single Taotai could get past the celestial dragon guards and the god of war? Grrr, they weren't supposed to be there. The prince was supposed to be a naive fool who gets eaten by the Taotai," Lord Yi said. "You've tangled with the emperor in the past, you really think the prince will be weak?" The same voice laughed. "Don't call him that, he's nothing more than a pretender, a foreigner. The line of azure emperors are the true rulers of Huaxia," Lord Yi yelled back. "Humph, you wasted precious resources luring in that Taotai. Wasted our time and resources for your own petty grievances and put our order in jeopardy. Cease your rashness at once or we will pull our support," the voice said before disappearing. Lord Yi was left to rage on his own. The end. So how was this part? I hope you like it. And if you like it, share this part with your friends, and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay, it's time for me to go. Bye bye.